Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. My name is Andre. I'll be taking you through what's new in Business Central in the 2026 release wave 1. So new release of Business Central, the first one for this year. Quite a few things that have actually been released, quite a lot, I'd say, in this release. Some of the things are, quite exciting new things, obviously more things in AI, more things in Copilot and stuff like that. Lots of improvements too in terms of Business Central, like different functionalities, features that have been added into Business Central. So there's quite a bit to cover this morning, but we will try to cover as much as possible. It will by no means be in depth into these specific features. As I said, there's quite a lot that's been released in this version of Business Central. I would definitely recommend to go have a look at those release notes, which we'll send over the links and everything for that. But we shall get started with this kind of going through what's new in Business Central. So, like I said, quite a bit to cover. So I'm going to go through some of the bits around AI and Copilot in Business Central, also have a look at some things around the finance and compliance side, some supply chain, very small piece in sales and commerce around that. The reporting and insights, obviously that's a big thing. Some user experience stuff, and then we'll just close. Feel free to please ask questions in the chat. There's a Q&A section too. Feel free to ask questions. I have some colleagues around too, so thank you for those colleagues that are going to try to answer those questions. If you do have any questions, if your questions aren't answered by the end of today's webinar, we will answer those questions afterwards. So please feel free. Like I said, a lot to cover. I will try to have a look at those ones at the end if there are any unanswered questions, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so just so you know, feel free to ask those questions, but let's get stuck in. So first, we're going to have a look at some of those AI and Copilot things. Two things that we want to have a look at here. We've got our accounts payable agent, and then also a personalized agent that we can add in Business Central. So let's first take a look at that accounts payable agent and what we have in there. So on screen, obviously Business Central over here, you'll see that we have this section over here for our accounts payables agent over here. Now, this is in a sandbox environment, and just so you are aware, you do have some free Copilot credits if you are going to try out this agent that you can use. The agents are billable, so which means Microsoft will charge you those ones. It's $1 per credit. But if you want to try it in a sandbox, you are able to up to a limit. As you can see, my limit has been reached, so it will pop up as a limit over here once that has been reached. Okay, so just so you know, you can have a look at that. With this payable agents, one of the things that they have added in this payables agent is for you to be able to do a three-way matching, or two-way or three-way matching, really. So you can see on the side over here the different steps that the agent has gone through. So in terms of having a look at that specific draft of the document, so this uses the e-document functionality. So you'll see over here it has a copy of the document that has been imported into Business Central. This is via an email. So this agent, if you're not familiar with the agent, has got a specific email linked to it, which I'll also talk about in a moment. And this will import those purchase invoices for you. Okay, so those purchase invoices and do the matching. So what's been added over here, as I said, is the two-way, three-way matching that Microsoft have now added into the payables agent. So you'll see over here on the line section, if it finds specific orders that is related to this particular document, you'll see that it'll give you some information into what it's matched. If there is information around what it's trying to match around here, those ones will show and it'll be ready for you to kind of review. You'll see that the different steps that it takes in, match first line to draft document. This again is just the different steps that it has gone through to try to match those different documents and the document to the orders. Okay, we'll have a look at this order matching, and there's different functionality that has actually been added, which really helps the agent in terms of this order matching. Okay, so the matching piece is what's added into this purchase document. The other thing that they have done too, which I think is really, really nice, is on the inbox, so this is my AP inbox that I'm using, if the agent has processed the specific document, it'll actually categorize it. So you can see it has a new category to say it's processed by the payables agent. So if there are specific emails that have not yet been processed by the agent, those ones won't be categorized. And as soon as the agent has processed them, they will be categorized with the process by agent, which I think is quite a nice thing. It's really handy. So you can see what has been processed and what has not been processed by the particular agent. Okay. Again, just they've increased that view. Sorry, where's my gone from here? So they have given that ability to view that particular PDF document. So this view of the PDF preview of the PDF document is available in other pages too from there. Okay. One of the other stuff that they've added, which I thought is quite nice just around this agent, is being able to stop all tasks. So it's a small little thing, but if a task is stuck in a specific process, you now have the option to just stop all tasks. So where you didn't have that before, again, now you have that ability to stop all tasks. They've changed the lookout or the layout of this a little bit. So in terms of being able to have that task over there, but just collapse the task pane over here so you can see it on the side. Okay. So there's that little addition to the user interface, I'll say. Okay. The other thing, as I mentioned, the next little piece was the being able to personalize, create a personalized agent. Now, being able to personalize an agent, you'll see over here, it's in preview. So this functionality is in preview and it's only available in your sandbox environment. Okay, so you cannot do this in a production environment. Microsoft give you that ability to be a bit creative and see what you can do with creating your own agent. But again, it gives you that ability to do it in a sandbox environment, but not yet in a production environment. Okay, so just be aware of that. I have created something very simple, just to try to play around with it and test it really. I've done something to try to say, have a look at all outstanding approvals and kind of create a task, excuse me, create a user task for me to actually let me know what outstanding purchase order approvals I might have and that I need to look at. The idea behind the agent is with agents is helping you, so doing some autonomous work. So there might be something that you might want the agent to have a look at and say, we have a in this case, I'm just using my purchase orders as a list and trying to say, let me go into the instructions over here. So you can give it specific instructions to say, have a look at the list of purchase orders, filter to those ones that are pending approval and do a specific task. You might have something else on the shipping side. You might have sales orders where you want to check if you have enough quantity to actually send out those goods. Doesn't need to give you a notification. What does that look like? So you can give it a bit of instructions on what this agent needs to do. You've got permissions that you can add to this particular agent too, and that essentially what that does, it will go and try to execute those different tasks from here. So you can see from this, it has actually gone and had a look at those purchase orders, identified that there was one purchase order that was still pending approval and given me some details around this on an outgoing message. Now, I initially wanted it to create a user task. It didn't exactly do that, but again, it's trying to play around with this and see what it can do. What I found really interesting was more around what the agent, how it reasons. I'd say you've got stuff like the agent tasks over here. If I just show you this. So these agent tasks, again, you'll see if it was the sales order agent or the accounts payable agent that was running, you'll see the different order tasks on here. If I show you this one that I have previously run, and we just have a look at the different messages, maybe not the messages, the different log entries. Let me take this away. So you'll see over here, it's got different reasons. So basically it's gone, okay, I have a new input message. I need to begin to have a look at my purchase orders. So it kind of tells you what it's doing and thinking and what it needs to do. So it's identified the purchase orders. It's created a filter for that. Provide a summary of the purchase order so you can see what it needs to do, so what its reasoning is, and going through the different iterations based off of just some instructions that you've given that. So quite a nice little thing, I'd say. You know, again, you are just able to, just to reiterate, this is only available in your sandbox. So you can give it specific instructions. These instructions can be exported. So if you were going to download the instructions, and maybe you have, again, we could use some development and actually create this in your production environment. We can export those instructions. We can, you can use this, and it can become a really good tool depending on what you want to do. But I think this whole being able to create your own agents is quite an interesting little piece in addition to Business Central, which will be interesting to see where we go with all of this. So those two little pieces that I kind of wanted to discuss around those different areas. The next thing that we can go and have a look at is around our finance and compliance. So a few things around this. There are some stuff around the approvals, so additional approvals that we can complete. There's now withholding tax in Business Central, self-billing, they've got excise tax, and there's also some changes around sustainability. Okay, so let's have a look at the approval workflows first. So in terms of approval workflows, they have added additional approval workflows now into multiple different areas. You've got approvals on the item journal now, on the physical inventory journal. Just realized I've got some spelling errors over there. But anyway, we'll mind that. You've got the requisition worksheet on there too, that can now go for approval. So these are all additional approvals that you can now go and create. So just to give you an idea, if we have a look at our workflow templates over here, if I just navigate into that quickly, you'll see you have different templates. So for example, our worksheet. So over here you can see purchase and payables. We've now got our requisition worksheet, which you can do the approval. So you've got some additional workflow templates that have been created for these different approvals. Okay, so it's kind of weird. It's one of those things that you know, it didn't think it wasn't there, but it wasn't. But now we have the approvals. If you want to set that up, you can do those approvals now in these different areas. So just a little piece around that, which I think is quite useful. Okay. Now, withholding tax. So withholding tax is, I would say, quite a big thing that has been added now. So we have the withholding tax, which, if you don't know what withholding tax is, basically, just to keep it in simple terms, withholding tax is just keeping back a part of the payment when either on an invoice or a payment. So you can kind of configure this in Business Central, that you keeping back. So instead of sending that, you're going to send that to the tax authority instead of paying the full amount to the supplier. Okay, so it's kind of keeping that specific amount separate, and you can send that and you can report on that. You can obviously see that details in terms of your withholding tax setup. So if we just go into some of the details around that, if you are going to use the withholding tax, you do need to set this up in the general ledger setup. You'll see that there is a flag over here that says enable withholding tax. So if you are going to use the withholding tax, you need to enable that on your general ledger setup. There is some other configurations that need to be completed. So if we just have a look and give you an idea on our vendor side, for example, let's go into my vendor. So in terms of the vendors, you'll have your withholding tax. So you'll have a withholding tax business posting group and product posting group that needs to be configured. You'll see over here on this setup, you've got two different ways of how you can calculate this withholding tax. So it can either be on an invoice or on a payment. So how you are actually going to calculate that withholding tax, what the withholding tax percentage is, based off of, again, specific legal requirements. If those ones are set by the government authorities, you can define what that withholding tax percentage is. And then you also have your different just kind of GL accounts and everything that are configured around this area. Okay, so what happens around this is that is then calculated when we do specific purchases for a vendor. Now, this withholding tax is currently only working for the purchase side. So it doesn't work for anything else. It just works for the purchasing. Okay, so anything around our vendors, withholding tax works for that. Around sales, it doesn't work. Okay, not yet, at least. Okay. So just to give you a bit of an idea from here. So if I just have a look at a invoice, do I quickly have this invoice over here? So for this particular vendor over here, you'll see I have my withholding tax entry over there. So I have my withholding tax entry over there. I've got my amount and the amount of this particular item that I am purchasing. If I just go in and preview post this, you'll see that we now also have your withholding tax entries. So over here, you have a new table called withholding tax entries. If I navigate into that, you'll see that we now have the base amount, and then you have the calculation of what that withholding tax amount is. So mine was 10%, hence why we've got the £100 or €100 that is set on this view from here. Okay. You also have another view on here, which you have your unrealized amounts, your unrealized base amount, and the amount remaining. So this would be used if you were doing that again on payment. If it was unrealized until that was done on the payment, that would become a realized amount from there. Okay, so you've got those new entries. Those would be posted to different accounts. Again, I'm not going to go into all the GL accounts, but those ones will be posted based off of the accounts that you have configured from there. The other thing, just to mention that you have on here too, is that there is a withholding tax absorb amount. So if there was a different amount that you might be calculating withholding tax on, that is different than this particular invoice. So let's say this is 2,000, for example, over there. That would then be taken into consideration when we process this amount on there. So we'll preview that. So instead, this amount over there will be used when will be taken into consideration over the amount that you have on the invoice. Okay, so again, a new feature that has been added. I think will be useful in loads of different countries that already require the withholding tax, but now we have that as standard in Business Central, and then can be used on those different areas from there. Okay, so quite a nice little thing that's been added in terms of that withholding tax from there. So if we have a look at what we have next, so self-billing. Holding time. So self-billing. So in terms of self-billing, this has now been added again in Business Central, but around the self-billing is self-billing purchase invoices. So instead of the vendor essentially sending you an invoice for the work that's been completed, either goods that have been received or services that have been delivered, you provide the invoice. You basically do the invoice on their part. Okay, so what that allows us to do is to invoice, and the vendor doesn't need to send us an invoice, but this will needs to be set up on the particular vendor card again. So on the vendor, if they are part of your self-billing, we can bill on their behalf, you configure this self-bill agreement, which basically then means that we can process an invoice on their behalf. Okay, now what does this look like? What this looks like is, as soon as we do that and create a self-bill order or invoice, you'll see that over here you have your vendor number, your vendor invoice number. This becomes grayed out, so we don't have to populate that field from there. So generally, when in kind of normal Business Central terms, when you have a purchase order with an invoice, you need to populate what that vendor invoice number is. But because we're billing it, it basically allows us to, we don't need that specific field from there. Okay. There is some configuration around this too, where you just have to set up a number series for that invoice number. So what happens with that is when we process this particular invoice, it will provide a self-bill number, which we have set up on our number series, essentially from there. Okay. So if I just show you on here, so we've got kind of the details that we have processed through. So for this particular order, if I go in and invoice this, so let's just say that's a quantity of 2 over there. If I go in and post this and we process that through, and I just say yes to this document, you'll see that I have this vendor invoice number that has then been populated over there automatically for me. Okay. This comes in quite handy. Where I've seen this more before is more on a kind of a service side, where you might have subcontractors or somebody that's doing work for you, and you're charging their time, and you know that they've worked 10 hours, 12 hours, for example, setting up that resource cost and then invoicing that resource. So you're basically then just invoicing for the time that they've worked, and obviously you're going to do the payment off the back of that. So that's where I've seen self-bill come in quite regularly, and then normally there would be some development changes around that, but now we've got that as standard in Business Central for that self-bill area from there. Okay, so thought that was quite handy, small little thing again, but kind of can make an impact from there. The next thing is the excise tax. So with this, I think it will be a growing feature. Let's put it that way. So what this basically is if you have different taxes that need to be calculated. So this might be for plastic tax or sugar tax, for example. This is what can be calculated, or Business Central can help you calculate these different types of different taxes. Okay, so for example, over here I've got sugar tax, so plastic tax in this example, not sugar. So over here I've got my plastic tax that I have set up, and you can say how this is going to be calculated. Is it by weight, sugar content, active component, volume, and they also got alcohol over here, quantity. So if we say that this is plastic, then on our items we can then configure what that plastic weight is that's going to have on that package, and that will make a suggestion of what we need to calculate in a journal. So if we have a look on the items, so this has to be specified on the items, you've got the items calculation that can be populated with the excise tax on there. Okay, so if I have a look at a particular item on here, we just have a look on there, see which one it was. So you'll see on this one at the bottom, so at the bottom over here you have a new tab that says excise tax. So for this item we're saying that we are calculating excise tax type, so we want to calculate what the plastic tax might be for this particular item. It's got 2 kilograms of plastic that might come with that particular item, so the wrapping around that item will be worth 2 kilograms of plastic. Okay, so when we calculate these items on here, so if I just go back to excise types, you can also specify on what document this needs to be on. So if I just go configure types over here, you can say, where are we calculating that? Is it on purchase? Is it on sales? If we're doing adjustment, do we want to allow the calculation of these excise tax to be taken into consideration from there? The other thing that I didn't mention is the duty. So this is the duty that will be on those items. Okay, so once you have those details configured, you then have a excise journal which can calculate then these different calculations based off of what we have sold and processed through in Business Central. So if I just change this over here, so you have the different journal batches. So if, in this case, we're looking at our plastic, so we want to calculate our plastic tax. So this, as you can see, when we go in and calculate this, it will have a look at any documents that have been processed, purchase or sales, because that's what I have configured. and we'll look at the items. So I have just that one item that I showed you that has been configured, and show what the quantity is, what the tax value is, and then what our tax amount is that we basically need to pay around those different tax types that we have configured. Okay. I think this will grow. It's a start, I'd say, for this different tax types, because in more and more countries, again, we're seeing the different tax calculations, whether it's sugar tax, plastic tax. Again, if you're doing anything in alcohol and beverages, there's different ways of doing that. One thing that I'd say is that you can't combine these different excise taxes. There is something else more around kind of the sustainability, where you can then kind of group them together. I forget where it is now, but you can kind of define the different materials around there. So you can define the different materials of this is made out of plastic plus something else. So, but you just can't combine them in this excise tax. Okay, so it works a little bit different. But it's a start, and we've seen this with sustainability again. When Business Central started with sustainability, it was kind of basic and it started growing and everything around there. Oh, takes me back to my next topic. So that kind of, there is areas to grow from there. I need to hurry up because I'm only on slide 2. So in terms of sustainability, just a couple of things around sustainability, not too much to mention. So just kind of quick to mention around that is that they have opened some APIs. So there's new APIs around sustainability. So if you have integrations to get sustainability figures and everything else around, you do have now more API integrations that are available with sustainability. But what they have included with this is different reports. Just to give you an idea around here, you have different report layouts that have been added. So if we're doing a sales invoice, for example, if I just go, no, posted one, not this one. So if I go posted, posted, oh my word, can't type, posted sales invoice. You have different report layouts that will show your sustainability figures. So if I print this and I change this report layout, you'll see that there is now ESG report layout. So for example, this standard ESG sales invoice layout, if I just choose that one, I don't have a great example on this, but it will show you your equivalent. So your CO2 equivalent, if you have calculated that, it will actually show the equivalent on the purchase, also on the sales document. Okay, so if you're doing a sales quote, even for example, there is a layout for the sales quote, and that will give you some more kind of information, kind of show off your sustainability figures to your prospects when you're doing sales quotes. So just a small little thing around sustainability that I kind of just wanted to mention around there. Okay. Right, so the next thing is around supply chain. So there's quite a bit around this area. The first thing is around purchase quotes. Okay, so around purchase quotes, you have the ability to create a purchase quote from a contact. So which means if you were to have let's say a requisition, so where somebody wants to purchase something, you might not have a vendor already created, and you might have a contact. Okay, so now instead of using an actual vendor, you can create a purchase quote from a contact. So if we go contacts, for example, I have a contact over here. So I'll contact over here Nicholas Makinson. So from here, I can go and say, I want to create a purchase quote. So if I go and say create purchase quote, this will go and use our contact over there. So instead of having the vendor, we can have our purchase quote, and we can use our purchase quote around this and create a purchase quote, do the approvals and everything. And then once we've processed that through, we can then go and make an order. And at that point, it will go and create the vendor, or ask us if we want to create a vendor, and we can create that off the back of a template. Okay, so that's a nice little addition, I'd say, being able to use that, because we could do that always for the sales side, but not for the purchase. Okay, so drop shipments. Drop shipments has improved quite a lot, and I think is made much better. in the sense of the functionality and the way that it works now. So if you are not familiar with any drop shipments, basically, if you have a specific sales order that's going to be processed and you're purchasing it from a different vendor, it's going to be delivered directly from the vendor to your customer. And that's essentially what drop shipments allow us to do. But the functionality and how we work with that has improved and quite made a bit of a difference, I'd say. So if I have a look at an example that I just created for us over here, just quickly find my sales order. So in this example over here, I have a sales order, and you can see I've marked this over here as drop shipment. So we're selling to our Tray Research customer. It's marked as a drop shipment. And what Business Central now allows us to do is basically from here, we can go and already create the purchase order directly from the sales document. Okay, before there were restrictions in terms of how we could do this. We had to do this through a requisition worksheet, for example, but now you can go and say, I want to create the purchase order from here. But before I do that, you've also got the order planning from here, just to show you. So from the order planning, you can calculate the plan. This would also allow you to have a look at what your demand is. You can see over here, it's picked up those two orders, and I can then make the order directly from this order planning screen here too. Okay, so that's one way that you could kind of use this. I quite like the way from the purchase order where I can, from the sales order, get my terminology correct. I can go already here and say, create my purchase order. Okay, so when I use this functionality, you'll see it says I've got these two that are marked as drop shipments. I have a purchase quantity of 1 for each of those ones, and I can hit OK. And this will then go and create the purchase order for me. Okay, so in this case, we have our 2 purchase orders, which we can then go and release and do all those good things from here. So if I do invoice, just quickly populate the invoice number. So the difference with this now is that we can go and without having to basically receipt this first, we can either just go in and ship that from our sales document, or we can finish the process around this to go, well, I'm going to receive and invoice that. That will process that through. Don't need to have a look at that. If I just go back on here, you'll see that we have that one document that is shipped, which I can then still ship from this side, but I can actually complete this whole document on here too, where I can then go and actually post and ship and invoice this whole document here. Okay, without having to complete the purchase side first. So there was always some restrictions around there. So I do have that ability to then wait for to process the sales document, or wait for do the receipt and then do the invoice. That whole purchase drop shipment process is kind of being improved from there. So if I have a look at this, we'll see that I have this that has been processed through, and it has been marked as received. So this was through the shipment that has been completed. So it does still correlate, it still updates the order. So it doesn't mean that I have to then go first to the purchase order, then do the receipt, and then go back into the shipment. So that process has basically just been smoothed out. Okay, so depending again on how you're working now at this point over here, I can wait for the invoice. If I'm waiting for the invoice to arrive from my vendor, I can then process through that invoice from there. Okay. The other thing that they've added with the drop shipment is allowing you to undo the receipt. So you now have the functionality to undo receipts and undo shipments too. Okay, so if that was previously an issue, if you have completed a drop shipment, you didn't have functionality to undo the shipment and undo the receipt, so you can make any corrections if there was something processed incorrectly. So being able to then now do that correction with the drop shipment adds far more functionality into this area too. Okay. So a few things, that drop shipment feature, I'd say if you're using it, it's definitely handy. Have a look at that and play around with that. It is far better than it used to be. Okay, PO matching. So this is kind of an area of improvement, and which I would say has definitely been added to help with agents. In my view, that's how I see it. There is now functionality to do order matching. So instead of just using previous like get receipt lines, so if you were just using a get receipt lines function, you can now use get order lines. Okay, so if I just quickly find my order, so let me go back in here, get my notes here. So if I just go purchase invoice, I've got a previous purchase invoice that I've created for us. 224, this one over here. Okay, so in this example, I have a purchase invoice where I might already start typing the line. So I have a line over here that I have entered. You have the option over here to go match order lines. So you have a new function that says match order lines. This will allow you to go and get the order lines or get receipt lines. So if I go get order lines, this shows me that I have an order over here with that particular quantity on over there, or with this particular line on, and I can say okay, and I then have a order match. Okay, you still need to do a receipt, and we'll get onto receipting in a minute. But if you're just doing the order matching, I can't process this invoice without matching a receipt to this. Okay. Where I see this kind of being more used is kind of more around services, I would say too. So if I have a look at this, I can go in and say get order lines. So you'll see there's a function over here to say get order lines. You have this one from previous, get receipt lines, but I can say get order lines. And you'll see on this, I have 2 invoice lines from here. Now, the other thing that has been added with this is if I actually just navigate to that document, just show you one thing. On the purchase orders, right? So I have a purchase order created, but you now have this functionality to say invoice, receipt on invoice. So for anything where we might have services that have been delivered, so in this case, I have some consultancy services that have been delivered. Instead of going into the order, processing the receipt, and then doing a matching against the receipt, I can then just do some matching against the particular order. So I can bring that and say, well, we've got an invoice, it's matched to this particular order that has been processed through. So we know that this services have now been delivered, for example. And what we can do is we can then go in and post this, which will complete the receipt against that particular invoice document, against that order. Okay, so it's because we've marked it as a post receipt on invoice, we don't have to first do the receipt and then process the invoice, which I think is quite handy. Okay. All of this, again, especially this functionality around the order matching. So, the order matching line. So I could, for example, go in, oops, not that one. I could go in this function again and say get order lines and say that we might want to get order lines for these few on here. I could still do the matching on here. So if I was going to do match order lines, you can see in this view, it's done the match order lines to the order and also to the receipt. Okay. So this definitely comes into play with helping the payables agent doing that two-way, three-way matching. But to me, I think the nicest thing around there is definitely on the purchase orders, where you have a purchase order that's created, especially for services, like I said, has been that have been delivered. You don't have to receipt that and then do the invoice. You can do the invoice, get the order lines, and then process that invoice from there, which I think is the most beneficial that we have on that release from there. Okay. Quality management. So In terms of quality management, this is a massive, massive addition to Business Central and is a huge module on its own. We would definitely be doing a webinar just on quality management to kind of show you all the functionality around quality management. I'm just going to cover it quickly and very briefly in today's session, just to give you an idea, but it is a full functioning module that has been added to Business Central. One thing just that's come to mind to mention around this is if you are, I'm going to upgrade to this latest version. So if you're using Business Central already and are going to be upgrading to this latest version 28 of Business Central, there is a separate app for the quality management. If you want to use it, that has to be installed. Okay, it won't automatically be installed with any new version of Business Central. So if you create a new production environment or a new sandbox environment, it will be there as standard. But if you're doing an upgrade, just remember that if you want to use quality management, it does need to be installed. The quality management app does need to be installed. Okay, so just remember that if you are looking at that. So if we just have a look at this, the quality management, you'll see if I do quality management from here, there are loads of pages, just to give you an idea, like that you have with the quality management, and you have the different pages and setups that need to be completed around this. You have inspection templates that can be created for different quality inspections that you are going to complete. So if it's something around packaging, for example, you've got these different test codes over here. So these different test codes, you can configure these different test codes in terms of what values. So if I just show the full list over here, you can see that you can configure these different test codes in terms of lookup values. So you can define what the lookup value is. So if somebody's completing a specific test, what are the specific values that they can pick from? If it's a value that they need to enter and it needs to be within a particular range. So for example, like this is a good example, temperature. So if you're doing anything in production and someone's testing the temperature of that particular product when it comes out of the production line, it needs to be between this temperature. That again is something that a value that can be submitted in there. So it's quite in depth. Again, all of these different areas over here, if I just kind of edit this, you'll see you've got your decimals, booleans, you've got different expressions, date, times. You can create different values of what this looks like. So you can see over here, you've got your pass, fail conditions, what table. This is something that I thought was quite nice too, is you can actually look up to a different table. So if you have a different table in Business Central and you want to actually get data from that table to also use in your quality test, it can do a lookup to a specific table, and you can add filters in there too. So that is quite handy, I would say, around those different setups and tests that you can configure. But around this, you can see when I'm doing any packaging, I can set up different questions, what those allow values are, what that looks like. The sample source, again, is it a fixed quantity? Is it a percentage of something that I'm going to complete? So that comes in, again, is quite nice. You've got different rules. So the different rules, if I have a look at something as the receiving example, different rules can be configured around this too. So how are we going to use this? In this example, we might use this on a purchase. So it's on a purchase line. I can add in conditions, so I can add filtering depending on what happens. How does this quality inspection take place? Is it something that I need to manually trigger? So the user will manually go in and trigger a new inspection, or is it going to be something that's automatically being created? Which again, I find quite useful. So let's say we're receiving some goods and you're always going to do a specific quality inspection on a receipt of goods that's being receipted. Business Central can then automatically create that, which would block that item from being used. So again, we can go so much in depth, and we'll definitely do a webinar on this specific quality management feature on its own. But it is quite quite useful. It's nice that you can set this up in different areas, whether it's, you know, your receipts and your production, if you're doing sales returns, for example, that you might be doing, any movements that will block the item in terms of the, you know, being used in different areas, where it's going to be used, what you can do with that if the quality inspection hasn't been processed through. What do we do with that if it's failed? You know, it can create an item journal for you too, to say, actually, we're going to negative the stock out. So there's follow-up actions that can be created off the back of a quality inspection. Okay, so again, very, very in-depth, but stay tuned. We'll definitely do a webinar on that on its own. So quality management is a big thing that has been added. Now, the next thing around the manufacturing side is around subcontracting. Okay, so this hasn't yet been released, so it is going to be available later this year. So in the next coming months, they will be adding these features to the subcontracting area of our manufacturing module. But what they are saying and what Microsoft are going to be adding is being able to create those subcontractor purchase orders from a production routing. So there was more kind of in the past, like there was more steps towards creating subcontractor orders, but now that's kind of eased out. I'll show you, like, I've got some screenshots just to show you how this works. You also got the ability now, which I think is great, to be able to transfer components to a subcontractor. So if you're using a subcontractor, but they might need specific components to complete their process of, you know, whether it's, I don't know, spray painting specific things and then putting it together, whatever that might be, that's probably a bad example, but anyway, you can essentially go and take those components and send that out to the subcontractor for them to complete that too. The receipting and using warehouse receipting, then when it comes back from your supplier or your subcontractor, that's also been added from there too. And then also now being able to add additional charges. So if there's any additional charges that need to be added, we can do that using the item charges functionality in Business Central. Okay. So just to give you an idea of how this will look like when it's all being completed and available for us to use, is that if we look at our production, when we have a production routing and we have some subcontracting event that needs to be triggered, you've now got the option to create a subcontractor order. So what this will do is that will go and create your subcontractor order from there. Okay, so we don't have to do this separately. You've got that function to then just run a create subcontractor order, and it will create the purchase order with the specified goods that need to be sent to the subcontractor. Okay. From here, you've then got that option now to create a transfer order to the subcontractor. So if there are component items that need to be sent along with that to the subcontractor, we can create the transfer order, and we've got the configuration of where it's going to be sent to, and you can see this subcontractor code over here. If I just go back and show you on the screenshot, you'll see over here you've got a subcontractor location, which is just using that specific location when it's creating that subcontractor code. Okay. You then have the warehouse receipts, as I mentioned. So when it comes back and it's being sent back to you, you then have the warehouse receipt that then can be processed through from there. And you can add those additional item charges that can be added to that subcontractor invoice, essentially. Okay. Oh, there's, just before I move on, you also got subcontractor prices, which I thought was quite nice. So there'll be different subcontractor prices that you can configure. So different price sheets that could be configured that your subcontractor is charging you for those items and the processing of those goods. Okay. Gosh, I've got to get through some stuff. So item variants. So basically, sorry, I skipped through that quickly. Sales and commerce, just a very small thing that I wanted to show in here. Item variant images. So what this basically means is there is Shopify integration with Business Central as standard, which is very good to use. But what happens with this too is you might have specific variants that you might use that you want to send to your Shopify shop, for example. But with that, what's been added is being able to add actually additional images to item variants, and they kind of extended that. So if I just look at one of my items, with my notes on here, drip. So this one, if I just open this one, if I have a look at my item variants, you'll see I now have nice little variant images displaying the different colors. So I've got images, and if I was using Shopify, for example, I'd be able to send this to my Shopify shop, which would then have the different images for these different items, and you have your different attributes that can be associated to the specific item variants on there too. Okay, so just a small little thing, not going to go into too much detail, but it's really just being able to have different variants, have different items, and they can be sent through to your Shopify shop from there. Okay. The next thing is on reporting and insights. So there is a big process going on where Microsoft are modernizing their reporting. So a couple of things that I want to cover on here. In terms of that modernizing of reporting, Microsoft are taking an approach of removing kind of hard-coded reports, let's put it that way, hard-coded reports where you can't really change anything. But what Microsoft are doing is changing that over to either Word layouts or Excel layouts, or using also Power BI reports to be more analytical and giving you as the end user that flexibility to kind of change those reports and change and use them in the way that you would and is intended to, and it's flexible for you to change in how you would want those reports to look like, instead of always coming to us as a partner, for example, or going to a partner where we would have to develop that and change that for you. So it's giving you that flexibility to do this yourself and be a bit more self-serving. Okay, there are updated reports that have been processed that, again, they're continuously updating these reports. So this is a list of some of those reports, and I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But there are more changes to come with report improvements and changes. Okay, so if I just show you this example over here, I have run this previously over here. So this top 10 inventory reports as an example, if this opens up, let me just refresh that if this one comes up. So this example over here, we've got our top 10, our inventory top 10. You'll see that it's quite a good report. They've added some data over here. So you've got your normal kind of print layout, I would say. So you'll see over here at the bottom, they've got a print layout and more of an analysis view, or to help with those analytics where you can have a graph and chart. So this is a standard report, right? So I can kind of use the slices to kind of have a look at the data and change what I'm looking at. And the data will obviously change depending on what I've selected or group of data that I've selected in this. And my graph will change. Oh, let's do that. Okay, so this, if I was to have a look at, just to show you in Business Central over here, inventory top 10, you'll see my report layout over here, where I have this report layout that shows my Excel report, and you'll see we have the old report, which shows as an obsolete report over there. So you'll see that more and more in Business Central. This purchase order, inventory purchase order, just to give you another example over here, again, you've got your standard report that you can look at, but then you've got your Excel report. And the interesting thing about this is that Microsoft have created different reports, both I can't do two things at once, purchase order. So over here, if I run this, you'll see that we have a normal Word layout. So we've got a normal Word layout for a normal printable report, or you can use an Excel layout, which has a bit more of the analytics side of that on there too. Okay, so you'll see, again, loads of these, what we used to call RDLC reports, are going to be obsolete and they will be removed from Business Central. Okay. So there's a big drive to go around with that. Also, just to mention, I've got 5 minutes. Just to mention around this too is that there is a new extension or an add-on to Word So if you go onto your apps in Word and you just look for Business Central, they have improved that whole layout with Word too. So if you're going to create and update your specific reports, they have improved that Word layout and how we can design those reports too. So quite nice, and have a look at those ones. Financial reports, I'll touch on this briefly. They have made improvements to financial reports, created a bit more of a life cycle, they're calling it, so financial reports. So these are standard financial reports that you can design yourself. They've changed the layout of this a little bit, so you can put this in a tile view where you can have a description and it just looks quite nice. You'll also see that there are things on here that show that it's a draft report. So this is where it comes into this life cycle, where you can then specify that if you are still working on this report, it might be in a draft status, so you can give it a different status. If I just go into editor definition, you'll see that you can customize these statuses. So whether it's active, it's a retired report. So this will just help users to know which report they should use. And you can see that you can define this and say whether that's blocked or how's that essentially going to be used. Okay. With this, you also have this dimension perspective. So with this dimension perspective, just to give you an idea on this, is you can, so what you would normally do is you would run this report 3 different times, for example, where if you were looking at it by department, but you can use this dimension perspective to say that I want to run this for all my different dimensions. So when I go in and actually print that report, it will have a look at all the different dimensions for that department and create this report as many times as we have different dimensions. So you can see it, if I just scroll back up, this is my main report with all my values as total. Then I've got my administration department, my production department, my purchasing department as separate reports. Okay, so that's kind of what's been added on there for those financial reports, and a bit of an improvement in terms of what that looks like in terms of that life cycle and everything on there too. Okay. Analysis mode. So this is where we can create a bit more of an analysis view on the data. So the analysis modes can now, you have new tabs, and you can actually export these tabs to include in as a standard view. So if you have any kind of development that's being done and you want to create a view that's available for everyone, but is actually part of your Business Central extension, you have the ability to do that. They are adding loads of different analysis tabs later this year in different areas. So again, on this, like the sales order side, we'll have a few more analysis views. Just for the people who might not be aware what analysis views are, if I just give you an idea quickly. Sorry, I know we're 2 minutes away, but hopefully you can spare some extra time while we finish this. Item ledger entries. If I just show you this quickly. So what we mean with analysis mode, if you don't know, we go and swap these details over in analysis mode, where you can kind of group data in different areas. So if I was going to group this by entry type, you can, again, kind of just view your data in different ways. Okay, so this is what we mean with analysis types. You can see from here, you've got the share, and you can export this definition. So this is where it will export a different file type. So you can see it exports a JSON file, which, again, getting very technical, but you can include in your Business Central extensions. But this is, like I said, being later this year, we'll get standard tabs for analysis views in different areas around sales orders and around the changelog areas. There's also things that they'll add around fixed assets, GL register. So more areas, more analysis that we can do on our data in Business Central that they're adding around there. Okay. Also on the item ledger entries, you saw as soon as I went into that item ledger entries, we didn't have tabs. So what will happen as soon as we have this data from this release is that we will have some standard tabs over here that we can use. If you didn't want to use that, you can personalize and you can remove them, but they will be there ready for you to use once that feature becomes available. Okay. Power BI reports. So around the Power BI reports, there are, again, if you're not familiar, there has been loads of Power BI reports in Business Central as standard, and you can open with Business Central as standard. But they have improved. The two things that I just want to show you is in the inventory report, they have added ABC analysis. So if I go on this inventory report, so this is the out of the box standard Power BI reporting that comes with Business Central. If you're not familiar with this, just so you know, you do need a Power BI Pro license to view these reports in Business Central. So you do need a license to actually view these reports. But you'll see over here, if I just show you, you've got this new tab over here that says ABC analysis. There is some setup around this, but I think this is quite nice. If I just quickly ABC setup, you'll see that there's an ABC analysis setup. So you've got different percentages that you can configure based off of your sales volume. So 50% of your sales volume is in category A, 30 in B, C, so forth. And this will basically define this particular report. So you can then look at category A is those items that we're selling as top sold items. These are the ones that we always have to keep in stock. And C are those ones that are not really used that much. So those are the ones that we might, we are happy to kind of purchase later. So the ability to have a look at this data, click on that class. So let's say we've got our class B items. These are all the items that we can see. We can drill through to different areas on there. So this ABC analysis is quite nice, I'd say. And again, as standard Business Central, it's a nice little thing to have. They're also going to have an ABC analysis for an Excel report. So that will also come later this year. Okay. I apologize, we are running a little bit, but as you can tell, there is a lot to cover, but we'll get there. We're almost there. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention too is around the sales report. So around the sales report, they have just added customer retention, so returning customers. So you can kind of view the returning customers. So you can see over here, we've got two new tabs, one for retention overview, retention history. So based off of different locations, who the customer is, who are the ones that are returning over time. So you can see over here, depending on what I click on, those little blocks are filtered, what the retention history is, new customers returning over a specific period. You get the idea, hopefully, but you can again change this view. But again, nice little report that's been added onto those Power BI reports. Okay. Two little last things that I wanted to mention on the user experience, avatars on list. So this is just a quick small thing. So if I go to any list now in Business Central, if I click on this, you see created and modified. If I click on that, this is a bad example, but you'll see that we have this modified by. Let me just quickly try to go into this view over here. This will show you a little avatar of the user that has last modified it, or the users that have created and modified this. So you'll see in this case, this is my administrator, and I have just a system created one, but you can see these little avatars. So this will also come in handy to know whether an agent has essentially modified or changed any data. Okay, so that's a little addition on there. And then the last little thing that I just wanted to mention also is the allowed posting date calculation. So this is on our user setup. Over here, you have your posting date calculation. So if you wanted to do a calculation, so instead of entering the specific dates of the closing periods, this could now automatically be defined where you go minus 1M, for example, and 1M. So you can do that posting date calculation that will automatically calculate what those posting dates are. So this means if we're closing periods, no longer do you have to go in and update the whole list of posting dates. You just have a calculation and that will automatically be calculated from there. Okay. Definitely the one last thing that I wanted to mention that I haven't spoken about, and hopefully you've seen if you are familiar with Business Central, is that you'll see now I have assigned a currency symbol that can be shown in all the values in Business Central. So mine is configured as sterling, but if you're using euros or anything else, or if you have a foreign currency transaction that's been processed through Business Central, will show the values. And this is just part of some setup that needs to be done on the general ledger setup, is how it's defining those values. So if I have anything, it can show me. If you don't want it, you can take it away, but I think it's quite handy. So I can see quite nicely if there is a foreign currency transaction, what is that currency? Instead of just showing the value, it can show me the currency symbol around that too. So I think that's quite nice and handy from there. Okay. Right. So I appreciate that we have run a bit over time. I've not been able to have a look at the questions and things, but hopefully my colleagues, I'm sure, have been helpful with that. If there are questions that have been unanswered, we'll definitely answer them and get back to you. But thank you very much for joining today's webinar. If you have any questions about whatever we've covered, please feel free to get in touch. I've put in my LinkedIn there too. We've been posting some things around, what's available in Business Central, our favorite features. They'll be coming out more features and videos and documents to download that we'll be posting on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn, but please also ask any questions that you have, burning questions, or just want to know more things. So please feel free to get in touch. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank you for the team behind the scenes too for setting this up and making this possible today. So appreciate that. And I apologize that we are 7 minutes over time, but thank you for those that have stayed in the meantime. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining today.